I think the people who are comfortable with pushing it to that degree to where you question your entire identity based off of
Right.
a name,
How you
Mhm.
pronounce the name. Yeah.
not even a foreign. It's not even like you took Beelzebub, so I'm gonna call him Beelzebub today.
Right.
Right.
That's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not pulled out of thin air. It's a
Yeah.
different pronunciation.
Yes, of the same
It
name.
just seems like two different names.
Yeah.
Yeshua, Jesus. They don't seem like the same.
And even the
Yeah.
idea that Jesus is somehow Hail Zeus, you'd be hard pressed to find a scholastic and verifiable history
Mhm.
of the name Jesus coming from Zeus,
Right.
Hail Zeus, or whatever.
Welcome to Acts2and42. Real discussions, real opinions, real stories and testimonies. Real church talk. Welcome to Acts2and42. All right, guys, welcome back to Acts2and42 podcast. This is Keith. Today I got Bruce back in the studio.
What's up?
Got TJ over there and Terry Neal.
What's going on?
What's going on, fellas?
Not much.
Get in this Yeshua. Is it a controversy? I don't know. Controversy debate. It's a little controversial.
Yeah.
It has been,
Yeah. Can be.
less so now, but at one point it was all over the internet.
Yeah. You know, they get a little overemphasizing on a matter that I guess we'll see. We'll talk about its importance or not. But what we're here to talk about today is the view, the belief, the understanding that Jesus Christ, as we know him in English,
Mhm.
and as most of the known world knows him, his name is actually Yeshua, that we should call him Yeshua, and that Jesus Christ is either incorrect, it's a bad translation, it's false, it's made up, it's somehow hailing Greek gods and a whole bunch of different things. So I guess what I'm here to deal with is A, what's the truth of the matter? And B, what kind of emphasis should we place on this?
Right.
Of what level of importance and based on what are we concerned about the pronunciation, what language you say it in? But as it pertains to Yeshua in the Hebrew pronunciation, I mean, what are your guys? I mean, have you guys come across this? I mean, what's your belief or view on this?
I think it's what TJ said. Seen a lot of it on the internet, social media, years, over the last few years. It came in real strong. Now I don't see too much of it. But even that alone kind of shows me that it's almost like faddish. You know what I mean? I think we talked a little bit about it earlier this week. When that Yeshua came in, you started seeing all the other stuff. Christian churches using prayer shawls and all of this other stuff that and it's like, and you've seen a lot of them do it. They started, and now all of a sudden, you don't see them do it at all. So it's like,
I wonder why that is. I wonder if they've reconsidered or just got lazy.
I think it was. I don't think it was either one. Probably, just a trend.
Just did it.
Just a
Okay.
trend.
Well, I guess respect to those that have at least stayed the course. If it wasn't a trend for you, and this was an actual conviction you have and a change you made or a choice you made, then respect goes as far as that's concerned. You didn't just jump on a trend and then it wasn't trendy anymore, so I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to say Yeshua. I'm not going to wear the little prayer cloth or whatever. I don't mean to say little. It's kind of condescending.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
No shade. I'm sorry. Bruce, what you got going on?
Oh, man. Outside of social media, or anything like that, I never knew any other name but Jesus. But once I seen it, I did go down a rabbit hole, and I kind of understand why some people might want to stick to that. Like, I think it comes from a place of just wanting to be truly authentic about the experience, with serving.
Yeah.
So I understand that. And I also think that too, it's like one of those deals where, I learned something new and, I got one up on you on this one, like some people might do, but like, me personally, like, it's like I said, like I came across it, I looked into it, and I think it's just one of those deals. Like, I think that people want to use it just to have that Well, I would hope it, it's an authentic thing and not just like a fad or a trend or, something like that.
Right. Doctor?
Scalpel.
I mean, being someone who's been active, very active, in Christian dialogue or discourse pertaining biblical topics, I've heard it. I've heard the debates between, is it Yeshua, is it Jesus, is it Jesus, as well as Jesus being a false name supposedly. Um, so being in that arena, I have more experience with the conversation, or I've been made more aware of the conversation and its frequency. Has died down a lot from what I've seen. So it's not as much of a hot topic anymore. I do think some of it comes down to fad behavior. It's very faddish, but I don't attribute it to authenticity. I don't think that a lot of the people who were doing it were authentic because it died off. I think something you find that's close to your heart, that you're genuinely concerned about, that you genuinely care about, sticks with you. I do see it tied to the not even Hebrew Israelite, but the whole Hebrew roots movement. They're trying to draw closer to the Hebrew culture.
Right.
So everything becomes Hebrew. And now it's like, well, wait, you don't even say his name in Hebrew, so you can't really have it.
Right.
You don't really hear. You got to say his name like this.
Right.
But that's where I see it coming from, or at least it accompanied such.
Right.
Whether it's causation or correlation, I really don't know for sure, but that's what I've seen.
So when it not pertaining to fads, people that is their conviction, that's their teaching, and and it sticks for them.
It seems to accompany
the Hebrew roots,
the days,
Torah observers,
yes.
Which are different. Hebrew roots, for one, there's it's just like Christian denominations. There's many, they call them camps, but there's many different camps of Hebrew Israelites, Hebrew roots, and just denominations. They don't all say the same thing. They don't, just like, Christians have different views on different things,
right?
Which I think is good. Again, we've talked about echo chambers and everyone saying the same thing just because you're not allowed to have an original thought. Is not good either. But some of the ones, matter of fact, I think the best, let me back this up. Just started like 3 different thoughts. Didn't finish one of them. Didn't finish one of them. Jumped to the next. Like a DJ jumping from track to track. And, chicka. Right. There's a whole bunch of scratching. So I do have, which I'm going to put the links below. I've watched, and actually a couple times, each one of these videos. Both videos for the emphasis. And again, I guess what I want to focus on is the emphasis on Yeshua. And you should not say Jesus. So I have videos for and against that, And the best one I found is from, I think they're Hebrew roots. The best one, the one I think that is most accurate and sound, like reasonable, not extreme, not radical, not, but they're Hebrew roots, but that doesn't mean all Hebrew roots don't emphasize that you have to say it. And I just said it to say that just because they're Hebrew roots and they say it, it may not mean that they think that you must say it. They just prefer it.
Right.
And they prefer it better.
Just for my clarity,
right?
Hebrew roots is just another camp of people who believe in the Hebrew or I guess
more Torah observant.
Yeah, Torah. Yeah,
right. So they're saying all the 66 books in the King James Bible are still applicable. The Law of Moses, all of it didn't go anywhere. I mean, if I could sum it up, and that Christianity has diluted the faith which we received from Judaism, which we did. So we've diluted it and we've made it we've Christianized it and basically taken away all the principles that God gave to Moses, which were statutes that were going to be forever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm really simplifying, but they basically follow the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and they say those are still applicable. They're still good. So the feast days, the you know, yhvh instead of saying Lord, and then there's an emphasis on Hebrew culture. Yeah,
Meats.
the meats, you know. So, and we could, man.
Essentially, they go back to the roots.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's it. That's a very adequate name.
Hebrew
Roots. You know, because they're saying let's go back to our Hebrew roots and do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that to distinguish them from the Israelites, Hebrew Israelites, I don't think they necessarily the Hebrew roots. I don't think their emphasis on the fact that they believe they're of Israelite heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard them make the claim that they're Jews.
Mm-hmm. Got you.
Where Hebrew Israelites make the claim that they're Jews because of their race.
Got you.
Their race is one of the tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very specific thing. Both I would call Judaizers.
Mm-hmm.
Both are ones that take Christians and make them like the Judaic culture.
Make them Torah observers. Yeah.
Torah observers, right. Which I'll tell every Christian, read the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There are strong warnings against Judaizers.
Mm-hmm.
Against the concision, against beware of the dogs of the concision. If it's concision, if it's circumcision, these are different ways that they referred to people that were, they were saying it was imperative. You have to do this to be saved.
Yeah,
you have to be circumcised according to the law of Moses to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And the apostles were saying, no, you don't.
Right.
You know. So nonetheless, so you mentioned they don't hear from God. T. You mentioned, you know, they'll say that you don't hear from God if you don't say Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you touched on that because that's what I think is most crucial is when you say, and this actually happened with one of the people I was talking to, they started questioning their relationship with God. You know, and I'm like, well, if we don't have a biblical standard for these things to emphasize it to the extreme that they do, then man, to make someone question their relationship with God thus far, it has to be a pretty important and a pretty biblically sound idea.
Right.
For me to say something that's going to make you feel like you never knew God.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like that's severe stuff. And then you have to ask yourself,
that's heavy.
Who has that motive?
Yeah.
Who has that motive to make you question?
Oh.
Dude, God will lead people wrong that are wrong, that don't understand, and be patient with them until the day he lets them hear or see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say, oh, you were blind the whole time. You never knew me.
Right.
You know, it's got to be heavy. So then, who's the one that has the motive to make you feel like you never knew him?
Satan.
Right.
Satan.
And I think that says something about not against saying Yeshua, but against emphasizing and saying if you said anything else, you don't know God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's, you know what I mean? Because those are two different things.
Yeah.
You can prefer Yeshua. I don't care, you know. So how about the merits of it? Who wants to speak to what his name was and Jesus, Yeshua, anyone want to jump in on that? I mean, like I said, I don't know what you guys know or have to offer, so just, you know.
I personally don't have too much to offer on it. I mean, man, T said a whole lot just a few seconds ago when, you know, he's had a lot of dialogue on it. And so because of, you know, talking with certain people who really believe this,
right,
you know, and, you know, making him go and dig into the information, I think that's what's up. I haven't had any dialogue with any people who say it's either Yeshua, it's the Yeshua way or no way.
Right.
So I don't have too much to really say, but I will say this: just looking at it from, and I know you got to be careful with common sense, but just looking at it from a common sense value, taking the common sense value of it. If Yeshua, is the Hebrew word for Jesus, which means you would be an Israelite. I'm not an Israelite. You know what I mean? I didn't
pronounce it that way.
To pronounce it that way.
Right.
I speak English.
Right.
And I know that, Jesus is the English translation of Yeshua. So I just don't see what the big deal is. That's just me.
I mean, I know I was in a Facebook group and it was like this big thing, God's name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I seen it with the I. Yeah, like, well, Jesus' name with an I.
Yeah.
So many different spellings and stuff, and it's like, you know, me personally, I mean, I'm not going to allow that to, you know, regardless of what anyone says,
Right.
I'm not going to allow it to affect my relationship.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just because, you know, like, I just look at it like one of those deals. Hey, that's what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not knocking it. That's what you
I
believe.
want to know the truth, though.
Yeah,
Don't get me
right.
wrong.
Yeah.
I do want to know the truth.
Right.
But, and because I think the truth is more important than, you know, than anything.
Right.
You know, regardless of what, you know, it's, you know, Satan's intent,
Right.
you know, is to make you doubt God or
Right.
make you doubt yourself whether or not, you know, God speaks to you or you hear God.
Right.
That's
No,
heavy.
but I'm a firm believer that
That's
truth,
That's heavy.
That's
real
real
stuff
heavy.
too.
Yeah.
that truth prevails
Yeah.
over all of that. So now it'd be something to find out that the truth is,
Yeah.
you know, all of this time that
Right.
I've been wrong.
And I think
You
that's
know?
what's happening to the people that are converted to the overemphasis idea is the fact that and this isn't shade, but I don't think any of us are that knowledgeable in the Hebrew language.
Right.
Even you're not even knowledgeable on languages to begin with.
Right.
You just talk.
Yeah.
Like we talk to each other and we speak what language we know.
Mhm.
But as far as the history of it all, the history of translations of the Bibles and everything, no one knows any of that. So for face value, you're not told any of this. You don't understand any of it. And then someone says, you know, his mother named him Yeshua. His name was Yeshua.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Why wouldn't? Where the heck did Jesus come from? Jesus doesn't sound nothing like Yeshua.
Yeah.
So for face value, I can understand that shock value where you would say, why wasn't I told this?
Mhm.
Why wasn't I told this? And why the heck am I saying Jesus if his name is Yeshua?
Yeah.
No, I would say Yeshua. That was his name. Seems pretty realistic, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Elementary, yeah.
now I want to get you to follow up
Mm.
because you were ready to jump in there. As far as truth goes, and as far as making matter of fact, you jump in because I don't know that you're not going to say what I was going to say. So if not, I'll jump in after you.
No doubt.
That's a great segue into the transition to your statement. Let's see if you read my mind. That's not what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but let you.
As far as the merits, I think that the overemphasis, or not even overemphasizing, because I think you can emphasize Yeshua while still not making Jesus to be pagan, you know, or damnable.
Right.
But the Yeshua only, I think it lacks merit. I think it lacks a proper understanding of translation, transliteration. There are, from what I've been able to ascertain, Yeshua, Jesus, and Jesus are all transliterations of one another. Well, Jesus is the transliteration of Yeshua. Jesus is transliteration of Jesus. And it's just one language to another.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
letter for letter, taking one, translating to its equivalent,
Right.
the next language. So if you're looking for a translation, yes, Jesus is a horrible translation, but it's not supposed to be a translation. You know, it wasn't supposed to be
Right.
translating the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
transliterating the word, which
Yeah.
it's important if you're going to concern yourself with the differences to at least know the difference between translation and transliteration, and to try to understand where it comes from, not get so caught up in there was no J letter, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
I
There
think
was
that's
no
where a lot of it starts
vowels
from.
and all of that
Yeah,
stuff.
I think that's
yeah.
where a lot of it started at, was
Yeah.
the whole J thing.
Right.
But just understanding the history of it.
Right.
I don't think it should make you question your faith altogether, you know, and whether you know him. I think the people who are comfortable with pushing it to that degree to where you question your entire identity based off of
Right.
a name,
How you
Mhm.
pronounce the
know,
name? Yeah.
not even a foreign. It's not even like you took Beelzebub, so I'm gonna call him Beelzebub today.
Right.
Right.
That's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not pulled out of thin air. It's a
Yeah.
different pronunciation.
Yes, of the same
It
name.
just seems like two different names.
Yeah.
Yeshua, Jesus. They don't seem like the same.
And even the
Yeah.
idea that Jesus is somehow Hail Zeus, it's unlearned.
Right.
You'd be hard pressed to find a scholastic and verifiable history
Mhm.
of the name Jesus coming from Zeus,
Right.
Hail Zeus, or whatever. But that's both what I see as far as the research or the information goes, and pretty much how I feel about those who make it Yeshua only.
Mhm.
I also have concerns about, I don't see biblically where he was named a Hebrew name. And I say that because I don't see in the New Testament where they spoke solely Hebrew.
Right.
And being in a culture where it was Greek-speaking people, Jesus spoke to Samaritans, he spoke to all kinds of people.
Right.
In a majority Greek-speaking territory,
Right.
I don't see why there would have been emphasis on
A language
Hebrew.
no one
Yeah.
knew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus the writers, they wrote the New Testament in Greek.
In Greek, yeah.
His name was written in Greek. Now, Paul said when he spoke to him in the Hebrew tongue and said, my name is Jesus.
Yeah.
But we still have them writing in Greek. So it doesn't seem there's an issue.
Right.
With it being in Greek, with it being in Hebrew, with it being in Spanish, with it being in English. It's as long as it is this name we're saying,
Right.
and not pulling something out of thin air.
Right.
I got a question. That's awesome. If we were to leave here today, right after this recording, and go to Greece,
Right.
What language do they speak in Greece?
Never been there.
Never been there either, but
Mhm.
I'm questioning whether or not they speak the same language that we speak.
My uneducated guess would be Greek.
They would
be
speak Greek.
predominant.
Right.
But I imagine
Probably
because
some
English
English,
is pretty like the
It's-
U.S.
it's a-
dollar.
it's a
Standard
an
language.
international
I'm
language.
sure there's a lot of
There's-
English speakers
right.
as well.
But
probably Greek.
But the national language would probably
Probably,
be
yeah.
Greek.
Right.
So we're going to go
Alright.
there and tell them, unless you say it in English.
Right.
You don't have it.
Or
Right.
anything other than what we're saying that it is. You know,
You don't have it.
is that what? Because if
Right.
Yeshua is the Hebrew name,
Right.
and it was written, in the common language was Greece back then, was
Right.
Greek back then.
Right.
What was the Greek pronunciation of Jesus?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's where the I.
Okay.
And that's where and I'll put illustrations
Okay.
on the video for the viewer, and I have illustrations I'll show you guys as we
Yeah.
get into. But that's the Iesus didn't come out of thin air. It was what he said, a transliteration instead of translation. Translation just
EIOU. Okay, it just came back now.
instead of saying I'm going to find the word for dog.
Right.
What's the word for dog in the other language?
Mhm.
And I'm going to pick that word. Especially, and I would think it'd be more common with pronouns like names,
Mhm.
where you don't just, it's not like what word means this in our language necessarily, but what letter and sounds correlate so we can say the same thing in our tongue. That's what transliteration is trying to do. And why I think some make a good case that it preserves the name to people to speak a different language.
Right.
Because if you say Yeshua to them, to people that speak Greek, well, it doesn't mean anything. And there's no sounds like that to them. There's no Y. There was no SH sound.
Right.
So they found the sounds and the letters that correlated to say it to a Greek person.
Yeah.
Where it would make sense.
Right.
I can go say Michael to a Spanish person. They may not know it. But if I
Say
say
Miguel.
Miguel, they know what that means.
Yeah.
And in Greek, it's Mykonos.
Yeah.
Well, I say Mykonos to an English-speaking person. They're like, you don't know my name. No, I was talking to them. That's your name when I talk to them.
Yeah.
Now they know your name is Michael. That's how you
Mykonos.
say Michael to them.
Yeah.
And this is what we don't think about when it comes to language. So I think there's a good case there. They were preserving it and doing a better job I'll say translating, but it wasn't a translation, but translating it to say it to Greek-speaking people.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'll wait.
Yeah.
There's plenty more there, but I'll wait.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's something that they're not all. I think a lot of people are taking it to be that I got one up on you.
Mhm.
You know, I have this. You don't say that.
I have this knowledge.
But as far as translation, if you want to translate the name, then call him Joshua.
Right.
You know, but if I call him Joshua, they're gonna be like, "Oh, who was that?"
Right.
So it's the same people don't even know the actual translation of his name who are debating and trying to stand on Yeshua only.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, well, wait a minute. What if I do call him Jesus? What if I just decide to speak Greek to him and call him Jesus? Is that wrong too?
Right.
You know, even though that's actually written, and even though many of the Greeks would have said that name, you know. But again, my greatest question is, what language were they speaking when Jesus was born? What was the predominant language? And how can we say that it was Yeshua versus Jesus, you know, or over Jesus? I haven't seen anyone actually say this is what he was named and here's how we know, you know.
Right.
And as far as
because that was something I thought about, you know, when I was this morning when I was taking Joshua to his sister's house.
Joshua.
Yeah.
You don't call him Yeshua?
His name is Joshua.
Oh,
but
man,
I was dropping him off at his sister's house, and you know, and I started thinking about, you know, the lineage, you know who, you know, the line that Jesus came through, which were Israelites, Israel, you know, Jesus of Nazareth, you know, and who was his father, who was his mother, his known mother and father, you know, earthly mother and father, which was Joseph and Mary, you know. I started thinking, you know, what did they name him? You know, what language did they speak? Right. You know, I don't know, you know, but obviously they would have gave him a name that was something that, yeah, you know what I mean?
Communicate with.
So I don't know. I don't think it was. I don't know, man. It's just language. It's just languages, you know.
I know an interesting point is Hebrews, where the writer actually translate the name Joshua instead of Jesus.
I was going. Yeah.
And he speaks of giving them rest. And he's like, well, look, if Joshua had given them rest, or excuse me, said if Jesus had given them rest, they wouldn't have looked after another day. The actual translation, it's the reference is to Joshua, not to Jesus. So when you're reading it, you're thinking, well, hold on now, if Jesus gave him rest, what is he talking about?
Right.
But he's referencing Joshua, and the translation of Joshua, of Yeshua, excuse me, it's Joshua, which is why they translated Jesus instead of translating it Joshua. But that should show, that is evidence of the difference from transliteration, where we get Jesus from, and translation, where the Hebrew writer wrote Joshua. Some, I think, they don't want to be egregiously wrong in an area as simple as a name. It's like, man, I don't even know his name. Man. How much less do I know if I don't even know his name? And has he heard me? And who am I praying to then?
And that's crazy.
And then to have them feel like they're praying to a Greek god.
Right. They put more emphasis on that than the power that actually comes with the man. You know, and he doesn't even.
He's not even. If I may, because
you may not.
But seriously though, I was at a point in time where I really wanted to know God's name, and it weighed heavy on me. And I think what happened was, it was just something I prayed about, and I used all the names that I knew. But ultimately, it just boiled down to having faith in God. Just period. Just like, you know, if you have faith in God and you believe His Son died for you, baptism, and you know, all that stuff. Man, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about Joshua. Listen, man. This is what I deal with. I deal with Jesus.
And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, you know.
I told Keith that the other day. I'm like, man,
but I can understand
if his name is Tree, man. If that's where, you know, and
I can understand if somebody might have that, you know, it knock them off their block. If they want that, they desire that real relationship. Like, I want the real deal. No holds. I don't want nothing else. I want the real. And if that means how I did it at one point, all the avenues. And then I reached out to him, and then I met him. And now I'm where I'm at. On the, you know.
I think there's an issue, though,
name above all names.
With the authenticity being linked to the name. Because authenticity of relationship, like the content of your relationship, or not the content, but the value, the quality of your relationship doesn't come through just a name. It comes through the relationship of knowing him, of actually knowing him, of actually being in fellowship with him, you know, and of actually having been in his presence. If the name is what the quality of your relationship hangs on, I doubt you've ever known him.
Right. That's powerful right there.
I say that understanding that many people don't, that today what we consider Christians, it doesn't seem like many of them have actually had any experience, any actual experience with Christ outside of what they get in church with the music, you know, what comes from music and the dance and your sorrow at times, you know. And I think it's gratitude too. You know, you're thankful that he's given you another day, that you have things. And I think that's become our relationship with him.
Right.
But we don't actually, we've never actually been in his presence. We don't know what it feels like to actually fast and pray and to know that he's there, to actually hear from him.
Right.
You know, and when that's missing, when your actual communion with the Holy One is missing, we find things to put in its place, and when one of those things are disrupted, it shatters our reality. Dude, I've been in a room, locked in, and you know he's there. And when you come out, you just want to go back in.
Right.
You know,
here he goes.
So he don't know about that.
Oh man,
this guy.
But there's a difference, and
he came off the mountaintop.
Huh?
Was such a one that was caught up in the third heaven.
Oh man,
no, I'm just playing.
But
we're right. Yeah.
There's a difference in the quality or what we consider relationship. So where I'm the kind of guy who has been in the room, you know, locked in, I don't see the name as being such a pivotal area unless you're taking things out of thin air that have no root, you know, with his actual name or translation. Then I'm like, we may want to be careful, you know. And as you said, you know, I think when it's preference, I'm not going to quote with you about that.
Right.
We can discuss it, but when you make it a damnable offense, now I have an issue because you're tampering on faith, you know, and on people's salvation over something that is not, thou shalt not say.
Right.
So before we close out, I do want to let you guys see it, just in case, you know, you don't know, but as far as the viewers and listeners as well, how Yeshua became Jesus, like you mentioned, transliteration. And before we go in, what it really boils down to is some people think and I've seen this in one of the videos I'm going to link, but transliteration is not translation. Transliteration does not preserve meaning or intent or purpose. Transliteration means nothing. That's the case that they make. And then, so I want to show you a few things. And hopefully, again, I always say this to the viewer where we have a lot of visuals. We didn't so far, but to the listener, when we have a lot of visuals, you might want to see the video because I'm going to show a couple examples of when you read what it would look like, if that makes sense. Like a practical example of, all right, let's preserve the name. Let's not transliterate it. Let's preserve it. So let me show these to you. I'll kind of turn my screen around since we're not funded by advertising to give us a big screen and all kinds of nice stuff. So this is just basic where it was transliterated from Hebrew. That's what the Hebrew word looks like. And to write it in Greek, you would write, this word would be written like this in Greek. Okay, it's important to understand. If you were to take it letter for letter, you'd write it like this. And his examples on Hebrew, the 4th chapter, with when they were referencing Joshua, same thing in Acts the 7th chapter when he references Joshua. They wrote this for Joshua, for the word Yeshua, the same name. They wrote this. That's how you write it in Greek.
Right.
So now it's very important for us to understand no one handed us Hebrew scrolls. We didn't go from the Hebrew language to English.
Exactly.
It went from the Hebrew language, which was only spoken by Hebrews. I mean, predominantly. And even the Hebrews also tend to speak Greek if they were learned, you know, or common people. But nonetheless, This is the Greek form.
Keith just pointed at me and said, "Common people."
I went like this. The commoners. I didn't look.
They looked at me and was like, common people.
These lonely serfs.
Common folk.
Whoa.
These lonely serfs, even though broken English. Like, I can speak to them in their own tongue.
Oh my God.
These savages.
These barbarians.
Let me take the gospel to the barbarians.
Yes. Listen, for those listening, you have to watch this part. You have to watch that.
Wow. That's you guys ever witnessed the preacher slamming somebody and he goes, and then what they want to do is they want to, and they start like, who are you talking to, sir? There might have been some subconscious meaning in all that. I apologize for my degrading and disrespectful, self-conscious or subconscious. Excuse me.
Savages.
All right, guys.
They can't read.
It's too funny.
Common language like English is, and we ask what language do they speak in Greece. They probably speak English. A lot of places speak two languages. One of them tends to be English, but that would be the Greek form. This is when it was translated into Latin. Another thing to consider, most of the languages we speak, whether it's English, I think even French, and I think Spanish, they're Latin-based.
Mm-hmm.
So they're similar.
Mhm.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
They're similar, but they come from the Latin language.
Yeah.
You know, so this is translated in Latin. This was in early English. Well, they kind of skipped early English, which is actually called kind of modern English. But Old English is different. There's modern English, which to us still looks like Old English, where the J in Jesus would be an I. It would still be an I like this. But then it eventually, I think, in the 1500s or so, the English language changed. No one changed Jesus's name. The English language changed. And that's very important to understand. They didn't have the J usage. They put an I there. And then in the 1500s, and I'm not going to get super scholastic, but they changed and gave the I a purpose, and they basically kind of created the J and gave the J a purpose and a pronunciation. That's language-based. That's throughout all of English. That wasn't a Christian thing. We're like, we're going to say J for no apparent reason at all. There's a great conspiracy to pronounce the J. I mean, because J, that's just such an evil sound.
That's never existed.
That is such a pagan sound.
I'll never say J.
Oh, never say J
Made a
again.
mistake.
What are you going to call Joshua?
Yeshua.
There you go. Now you got to get your
Shots fired.
So this is very important to understand, and that's when the person I was speaking to, I was saying, man, it's very complex, and I'm not trying to talk over someone's head,
Right.
but you have to understand the history of language and also just translations of the Bible, how it got to us. We didn't get Hebrew. Suppose you want to say, yeah, but now we do. Now we have it. So let's take the Hebrew and say it in our tongue. Okay, sure. Say Yeshua. But it doesn't give you a track record where that was emphasized by anyone. And this doesn't show conspiracy. This just shows the evolution of language. That's it. So what I did was I pulled Matthew 21, the prophecy. And this is Greek. And this is how the transliteration, how we would read it in Greek, okay? And this is what it is translated to. She will bear then a son, and you will call the name of him Jesus, right? It's prophecy of Jesus. And then, the naming of Jesus. So we see what? The Greek. The Greek. So if you just look at the Greek, if they were writing that to a person that spoke Greek,
Right.
How does that work out? Crazy. You don't even speak Greek, and you understand. See, it doesn't just you
What
just
is
know
that?
that means nothing.
They shall call his name Scribble.
Did your daughter get a hold of this? Like, to them that doesn't know Hebrew, or they may know of the Hebrew language. Like, if you saw Chinese characters, you would say,
write it.
well, all of a sudden you're trying to write Chinese. I don't speak Chinese.
Right.
So it's very important to understand that if they were to preserve, let's preserve the name. So you would preserve this. You're saying that you would preserve the Hebrew letters themselves, not the name. So the Hebrew letters themselves would mean nothing to no one.
Right.
Except for Hebrews. So, no, what I mean, the pronunciation, Yeshua. Well, there is no pronunciation like that in Greek. Those letters, those sounds don't exist in Greek. So it would have been that. That's how they would say that word. You understand how weird it looks once you look at it in language? Same thing with going back to Joshua, right? Joshua, the son of Nun. Let's throw that in there.
Yeah.
Preserve the name. You could spell it Yeshua. That's not preserving the Hebrew word. Right? If you want to, like I said, then say Yeshua. Say Yeshua. Say Joshua. If you want to translate it, say I don't care. Yeah. But this is an example of what they would have done had the emphasis been on the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word. Yeah. The word. It would have stayed in Hebrew and no one would have been able to understand it. When you change it to Greek, the word then changes. So here's another example. This is not biblical at all. This is just a sentence. The philosophy of whatever that is emphasize personal and government morality, correctness of social relationships, justice, and sincerity. So, okay, who is this referring to? It's a nice phrase. Who is this the philosophy of?
Jonathan.
What language is that?
I would have to say T. That looks like the Son of Christ.
That's T-Sock.
That's T-Sock.
His son wrote T-Sock right there.
Yeah, that's T-Sock.
Oh, no doubt.
Okay. That's the word for Confucius. How in the world were you supposed to know that? If I didn't translate to your language with characters and sounds, that's what it means. Whatever it does, I'll correct it. But yes, that's what the word Confucius. Those symbols mean something. It means this and this. But no, it's Confucius in English.
Emmanuel.
That's how we say it. Emmanuel means.
With us.
So translate it. God with us. So we'll call him God with us. No, the word is Emmanuel, but that's what the word means. Yeah. But if you translate to English, it would be Emmanuel. Now, I don't have the illustrations for it, but there's so many words that are transliterated, you literally wouldn't be able to use probably half the words that you use. And this is what people don't realize as far as the language that they speak every day, even in a biblical sense, which I probably know a little bit more of than I don't know the etymology of English words because I haven't studied that. But when you study the Bible, you look at the etymology of the word, where it comes from, what the language base is, what it means. And if you look at like the word deacon is not an English word. If you were to translate the word in Greek, it would be servant. Maybe minister, but you would call them servants. You would call them ministers. Yeah. But it's a Greek word that we pronounce. It's transliterated into English. You have no problem with saying the word deacon. You have no problem with saying the word bishop. Bishop is not an English word. You know, these are all transliterated words. Yeah. So nonetheless, but there's a basket full of them. There's so many. You can't make a case that transliteration is not used every day. It's used every day and it's acceptable. And it's the practice of preserving, to me, in my unlearned, because I'm still unlearned, view of it. It's the practice of preserving the form and the sound of the name or word that you're trying to get another group of people to understand what you're talking about. You show them those characters or you say it to them in the whatever Hebrew way they say it. What was that? Right. You need a tissue? I mean, you need to clear your throat? What was all that? Because we don't talk like that. Yeah. So nonetheless, to kind of conclude, I'd rather conclude on the relationship part. Yeah. And one thing I wanted to add, and I just wanted to see, not that I thought you'd read my mind, but I just want to see where you were going first. Cornelius. Before his conversion, Acts the 10th chapter, what did Luke describe him as? The author of Acts. What does the book of Acts describe him as?
A just man.
Just and what?
Giveth alms.
Devout? To who?
To God.
To God. Yeah. He didn't know God's name. He didn't even know the gospel. He didn't know Jesus Christ. What God was he worshiping? As a Roman, I doubt it was Christ. As a Roman, I doubt it was even Yahuwah or Yahweh or Yahweh or Jehovah, whoever you think the Tetragrammaton Jewish God is. I doubt he was worshiping a Jewish God if he wasn't a Jew, right? Because he was a Gentile, correct? What God was he serving? So why did they perceive him as a devout man that loved God? You understand? So I think there's an apostolic and an apostle's perspective on devotion, on when the heart's intent is true, to love and honor God and to serve him, even if you don't know who the God is.
That's going to come up in the fasting and prayer one.
Yeah? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Make sure it does.
This dude, man.
Oh, yes.
I see you wrote that blog too, by the way. I like that. That was
Shade on it.
No, that wasn't shade at all. That was a correlation. It wasn't shade. It was a correlation. Okay. Right. You said, and I called you on. Like, all right, you gonna make that happen? And you did the very next day. Wow. Good for him. Got the blog out there. I kind of joked with him on the last podcast we did that He always says there'll be a blog on that. And we haven't seen the blogs. But he did. That wasn't shade, that was credit.
That oak tree.
It's a backhanded compliment.
Backhanded.
No,
all the rings on.
But no, I want to see that. I want to see that come in. I want to see that comes into play. So I don't know, but I think I want the emphasis, the takeaway, to be more of what we talked about today, the relationship. You know, when the heart's intent is true, it doesn't matter what you say or how you say it. You know, and you don't see a biblical standard precedence, nothing established that makes. And I've again, check out the Hebrew roots guy. You know, this is coming from their camp, not just from me. But there's nothing in the Bible. This is what he was saying. There's nothing in the Bible that makes the emphasis on the Hebrew language. It says you have to say it in Hebrew. You know,
I mean, when do we even get the Hebrew text?
Right.
Almost 1,000 years after.
Why, man?
They were speaking Greek. They wrote it in Greek.
Right.
The first, we'll be generous, or we'll be conservative, just say 500 years.
Right.
First 500 years after Christ, it was Greek. All of it.
Before the Masoret started to try to restore the Hebrew language or Hebrew text, which was, for all intents and purposes,
so what are we
a dead
preserving?
language.
What are we preserving?
Right.
The Hebrew that came later, or the Greek that was translated from?
Right. And you mentioned the translation of the Greek, the Septuagint. In the Septuagint, the story of Joshua, because Jesus wasn't on the scene yet. The story of Joshua. How'd they translate his name? Jesus.
Right.
The same thing you saw in Greek. That's how you preserve the name. That's how they preserve Joshua's name. You know, which they may have said it Yeshua, but the Hebrew characters would have been those, which means nothing. In order to get that to someone, they would have to say Jesus, or however the Greek properly pronounce it, because I can barely speak English. So I definitely am not fluent. It's true. Listen to the podcast.
Yo, man. I just want to say that they just put this entire thing in a body bag.
This guy is the hype man.
Hey, man. Call the coroner. Keith just basically body bagged the whole topic at the end there. Yeah, you did.
I think it. I mean, it was.
It puts it in context.
Yeah,
I mean, hopefully, it just puts it in context.
That
if you want to preserve it, then preserve it in Hebrew. And those were the characters. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to keep reiterating. You know,
body bag.
But in no way is the pronunciation or spelling in English of Jesus made up, and like they make it seem like it has no correlation with Yeshua at all. But it is the way that we would say the name that they gave us, that they gave them, that they gave them, that they gave them. That was like the family tree of it. It wasn't conspiracy. It wasn't diluting. It was reaching other people. If I go say it to my, friends in the Philippines or friends in Pakistan or friends in wherever, and I don't know how you say Jesus in Urdu, but I better say it in Urdu if I expect someone in Pakistan who speaks that language to understand it.
Right.
If I say Jesus, unless they already know who he is and have some grasp of English, it means nothing to them. If I show them the JESUS, it'll mean nothing to them. And their letters mean nothing to me.
So it sounds like to me, I guess the Yeshua camps, their whole thing is not just the pronunciation, the characters and everything. That's what they feel.
Well, no,
on the word.
I think theirs is
Jesus.
just the pronunciation. Yeah, you should just say it this way, even
though you wouldn't be able to understand it if you read it or write it.
Right. So their emphasis is pronunciation. They're not thinking about if you hold on to the language, then hold on to the language, right? Who says things in English but can't read or write English?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
do you understand that concept?
But that's what it sounds like,
right?
That's what they think that we should do. Even though we can't speak it, read it, or write it, we should be able to.
And they're not emphasizing that you read or write it. You should just say it.
Just
that way.
right. That's right. The whole thing. Yeah.
And again, if since that is a close, that's the English way that we would say their word, Yeshua. I don't know how a Hebrew actually says it. You know what I mean? Like when someone that speaks Greek, it says these Greek words, they say it better than me. Someone that speaks Spanish, I say habla español, or whatever. And it's like a joke of how Americans butcher Spanish, hola, hola, But when you have someone that's their native language, they say it different. So there's no way we're going to say it the way they say it.
That's
but
true.
that's the best way we could.
That's
is
true.
Yeshua. If you think that's good, if you want to say Joshua, sure.
I'm with you.
Say Joshua. If you want to call him salvation, which is what the word means,
I'm with you.
Translate it and call him salvation.
Yeah.
And that's a little trick they do in one of the videos. I just want to kind of give people insight. They show how Jesus, his name means salvation, right? And it's all throughout the Old Testament. And it's always in the form Yeshua because it means salvation. And then they find scriptures that, again, I'm not an expert on language, especially not the Hebrew language. But they find scriptures that aren't using Yeshua as a pronoun. They're not using it as a name. They're not talking about Joshua. They're not talking about there's a few different Yeshuas in the Bible.
Yeah.
There's a few of them. They're not those where it says you shall see the salvation of the Lord. Wait, bro. What does that mean? Like, so they're saying you shall see the Jesus of the Lord. Like in our terminology, that's how they're using it. Yeah. Like, all right, maybe, but that's not a case for why they stuck to Yeshua and you should only, because that's the only word. No, that's where the word, which the name is derived. It's like saying shalom. Well, our daughter's middle name is Salom, and it's from the Hebrew word of peace, which is shalom. And my grandmother was like, "Well, shalom. It's not Salom. No, the name is Salom. The name is Salom.
Yeah.
But if you were to speak of peace and to say, well, we should be peaceful or peace to you or whatever, you would say shalom.
Yeah.
So it's two different things, but it's derived from the word which means peace, but it's a name. It's two different things.
Yeah.
You understand? So, but they're taking the word shalom and saying a shalom. Well, no, the name is Salom. They're doing the same thing with Yeshua. They're showing areas where the word is used as a verb, as an adjective, and not as a name, not as a noun. You know, sometimes as a noun, as a thing. But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm definitely not the guy to do all that.
I mean, doesn't change my faith and trust in relationship with him. No. You know, Jesus. And
that's something that T was talking about that I didn't want to bring back. And if you just brought it back, why'd I interrupt you? How do you hear from Jesus? How do you hear from God? How are prayers answered? Yeah. When you say Jesus and it's the name of a false God. How do you explain that? Yeah. Like your faith, and you say Jesus,
because
God hears you.
Because I only know Jesus to be the one true God. So when I say Jesus, just because it could be the name of a false God, I don't believe it to be.
Right.
It's about faith.
Right.
And that's why I made the statement. It could be tree.
Right.
And and I'm not trying to blaspheme him or anything like that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But if that's where my faith lies, then I'll say tree.
Right.
I say Jesus.
Right.
Because that's what I believe in.
Right.
But
if you're wrong, how are your prayers answered? And we just did a podcast with Emmanuel. Went over several testimonies, and he calls them
because
he's
Pakistani
and says
about
Jesus.
The 10th chapter of Acts. It was Cornelius.
Yeah.
It was a man who loves God. So it's just words. It's about what my heart expresses.
Written on the heart.
It's about what my heart believes. It's about me being filled with His Spirit.
Right.
And me accepting His Spirit. And what about the people who can't speak at all? The dumb who can't speak at all. But
God hears the heart. That God is a hearer, not a voices only, but a heart.
Yeah. We walk by faith.
Yeah.
Not by sight. Or sound, or any of those things. We walk by faith. So we believe Him to be the one true God. I think I'm not sure if it was T or Keith who said it before, man. His name was so powerful and awesome that they didn't even have a word for it. They couldn't even call His name. So I mean, how do you explain that?
How prayers are answered, how miracles are performed when I call on this name if it was wrong.
Yeah.
So
especially considering that half of our Old Testament is based on the fact that if you were wrong, you weren't getting answers.
Right. And
call on them.
And
you don't get no answer.
Right. And again, it's not like you're saying Beelzebub. You have a a blog on the website about taking the Lord's name in vain. And the 119 Ministries, the Hebrew camp, the Hebrew roots, I don't know, the Hebrew roots video on Yeshua. He actually said that taking the Lord's name in vain or profaning the Lord, some people won't say it, or they'll emphasize because you don't profane the name of the Lord. You don't take it in vain. You don't blaspheme. And like you mentioned, it's not blasphemy, and I'm not saying something crazy, but that's how they deem it. But that's not what, and he said the same thing you did. Taking the Lord's name in vain is taking the banner of the name of the Lord
and using it for
going forward, and then
self-righteous purposes.
Living like a hypocrite.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Taking the Lord's name in vain and saying, we talked about the Christian, I am a Christian, and then doing otherwise.
Yep.
That is taking the Lord's name in vain. And so it doesn't have to do with pronunciation. It doesn't have to do with, well, there's a special way to say it. Well, if that's the case, well, how does he go by El? How does he call himself, El Shaddai here? How does he call himself
a representative of the Lord, of God, while living a life contrary to the very one that you profess to be walking on behalf of?
Yep. And that's the same case, the Hebrew roots guy that's saying we should say Yeshua. That's the argument he made against emphasizing a sacred pronunciation. He wasn't for, emphatic about how you had to say it. You shouldn't be. He said you shouldn't be like that. You should be cautious of people that are like that. Which is why it was my favorite video. He actually kind of like preferred, but it was more sound and more biblically rooted in a proper approach to the pronunciation, if anything. But I would really warn people against people that emphasize, and I said the same thing about any Judaizer of a sort, anyone that's making you almost infatuated with Judaic practices, with the law, with the Torah, with feasts, with tassels, with all these other things that you don't see Christ say a word about. You don't see the apostles say a word about. They spoke harshly against those things. Yeah. And they the only time they glorified them was as the shadow of the good things that were to come. And I've got plenty of videos already on that. We've talked about in several episodes. We've tiptoed on the law and stepped all on it at this and other times. But you didn't get this from the new covenant. There's a new agreement now. That was based on old agreements with another people that were hard-hearted and wouldn't listen to God. Is that you?
Heck no.
Okay. I mean, so better not be. No. Okay then. No. But be very careful with this. And if you want to, be careful. And that's all I told the person. Look, I'm not trying to convince you not to say Yeshua. Right. That's not my position. Yeah. If it makes you feel better, but don't doubt your previous relationship with God.
Because you say Jesus.
Right.
Man. And not Yeshua.
Right.
I'm still stuck on the fact that you can cause someone to doubt their entire standing before their Lord off of a transliteration of a name.
Right. There are more just reasons. If you were to put someone in that position, there's plenty of great things that are Christian principles that are emphasized by the apostles. There's plenty of things that they said, look, you need to check your life, son. You're not a Christian. You need to look at yourself. They said that from plenty of other things, and it never was. They were the ones that wrote it in Greek. Yeah. Matter of fact, I think I said this to you, if for those that aren't familiar with the book of Revelation, verbatim, but when he mentions the angel from the bottomless pit.
Well,
how about Paul? How about Saul? These are examples where they gave the name in Hebrew and in Greek. When they named people, because you don't know who the listener is, you don't know who the reader is, and you might be more familiar with Paul's name as a Jew, which was Saul. But the Roman transliteration or the Roman name of that same is actually Paul. Same name.
Whose name
Cephas,
is Abaddon,
Peter.
In the Greek Apollyon.
Yes.
Same name.
It meant destroyer, but it was different in different languages. So he told them both. Why would he tell them both that there was an emphasis of one?
Right.
But don't doubt your relationship. If you're really hung up on it, and man, I can appreciate where you're coming from. Man, throw anything that sticks. I don't know what you want to be called. If it's Yeshua, if it's Jesus, I'll call you both. Yeah. I'll pray and I'll say both of them, but if you feel like it's safer to try to say whatever the Hebrew, whatever his mama would have called him, Mama named him Clay, I'm going to call him Clay. His mom called him Yeshua. That's what I'm going to call him, If that makes you feel better, good. But the emphasis is the problem. Yeah. The saying that this interpretation of that one, this language of that one is illegitimate.
You're right.
Right. That's where you're wrong. So
it's all about the relationship.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, guys, if you made it through all this, you are a saint indeed. You are one of the just and holy ones. You will be raptured in that day.
Oh, man.
Sheesh. Hopefully you enjoyed it, for one, but hopefully we were able to give you something sound, and I want to be reasonable. I don't believe in sharing one side of something, which is why I'm going to link several videos for and against what we're kind of saying. All right, cool. Well, thanks for doing this. Thanks for listening. Again, let us know what's going on. If you like, if you don't, or what your thoughts are concerning Yeshua. Definitely let us know that in the comments or hit us up on Facebook or wherever. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, watching to the YouTube audience, and Acts2and42.com for more.
Peace.